All right, so today, a top 5 list for books on a theme upon which I have spoken often, of apologetics, of the defense of the Christian faith, and of theodicy, that is, vindication of God, proofs for God, defenses of God, through aesthetics. So apologetics and theodicy through aesthetics, through beauty. So top 5 books that do that. Now let's make this very clear as we talk about truth, beauty, and goodness. But about beauty, most of all. Let's make clear that we're not talking about books that are about art or about aesthetics. We're talking about books about God, books about the Christian faith, books about living under, with, for, through Christ. Having said all that, the first book on our list is actually a book about art. Number 5. Madeleine LEngle, she of A Wrinkle in Time, Walking on Water, Reflections on Art and Faith. So yeah, this is a book about art, but it is primarily a book about how the incarnation of Jesus Christ makes everything sacred, which is something that is manifest, that people can see, that the world is sacred. The very unholiness of the world proves that it's sacred. That human beings are sacred. The very broken image of God in them proves that they're sacred. And if there is a sacred, then there is a God, a holy God, a beautiful God. Absolutely fantastic. Very much connected, as I said, to the arts. And one of the main things that you'll get from this book is that the secular-sacred divide is faux ponies. Just made that up. It's ridiculous. It's silly. It's a construct that just falls apart. Everything is sacred because of Jesus Christ. It's our task to go out there and sacrifice it for. This one is also ostensibly about practical, hands-on things. So the first one, about art, about writing books, about making sculptures. This one is about cooking. Francis Farrar Capon's The Supper of the Lamb. And The Supper of the Lamb, if you've read it, you know it's not just about cooking, although it is, because the conceit of it is that you read in The Supper of the Lamb 1 week's worth of recipes out of one lamb. So you eat for an entire week out of this lamb that's been given for you. But really, it's a meditation upon all of reality, all of God's creation. The section on peeling an onion, the famous section on peeling an onion, by itself is worth the price of admission. It's 4 or 5 pages just on the significance of the onion and the significance of the rite of peeling the thing. It will absolutely blow your mind if you've never read it. The passages on wine and joy and cream and fat and abstention and feasting, it's hey, you know what? I'm going to say that it's a never-ending romp. It's a week-long, never-ending romp. Man, I really thought I had found the perfect place to do videos, but the sun came out. So now it's all weird. Whatever. I'm in a purple room with a cage above me. And I'm going to use this place frequently to do videos from. 3. Okay, number 3, and for those of you who are philosophically minded, finally getting in to philosophy, here's a book that is rigorous, logically rigorous, truly from the truth end of the truth, beauty, and goodness lens. And yet, it is about apprehension as much as it is about comprehension. When you open the book, the first thing you're introduced to is how to think. Now, all very loosely, right? These are scattered thoughts. They're not scattered. They're very tightly organized, but they're not organized in a way that you would be comfortable with. The first thing that Pascal does in his Pensees is, did I mention that we're doing Pascal's Pensees as number 3? The first thing he does in Pensees is teach you how to think. And teach you, although he doesn't use these words, the difference between comprehension and apprehension. And all we modern Christians want is to comprehend. We want to envelop. We want to understand all of it. We want it all laid out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Done. I understand it. But one can approach truth through beauty as well. And do not think that I'm getting overly mystical or Eastern here when I tell you that good things and true things are beautiful things. And if you have the mind of Christ, then you can look at something beautifully and immediately apprehend what others take a long time to comprehend, that it is in fact beautiful, true, and good. So Pascal teaches you how to think again, how not only to comprehend, but how to apprehend. And then it's just wisdom after wisdom after wisdom. Hopping here, hopping there, we could say hither and thither, with drops of golden wisdom. Okay, if you are a frequent follower of Joffrey the Giant, then you probably have a guess about which books are in my top 2. So I'm going to tell you my top 2 books, not necessarily in that proper order. Then I'm going to do my honorable mentions. Then we'll settle out that order. So, 2 books that have influenced me very much as far as Apologetics and Theodicy through beauty are N.D. Wilson's Notes from a Tilt-A-Whirl, from the Tilt-A-Whirl, and G.K. Chesterton's Orthodoxy. Honorable mentions, boom. Angels in the Architecture by Douglas Wilson and Douglas Jones. C.S. Lewis's The Abolition of Man. Notes from Underground, which is obviously a title that Wilson N.D. cribbed for his Notes from the Tilt-A-Whirl. The Rock Choruses from the Rock by T.S. Eliot, which illustrate the ugliness of life without God and how much man needs God, which is a way of talking about the beauty of God. And N.T. writes The Resurrection of the Son of God. Is there anything more beautiful than the resurrection? Why today? I read a beautiful little essay by a Brazilian pastor named Emílio Garofalo. I'll try to remember to put the link down below, about the death of his father. It made me think of my mother and of her death. Very beautiful. The resurrection is our comfort, and the resurrection is beautiful. That's what we take comfort in when we think of the resurrection. We don't think of the truth of the resurrection. We don't even think of the goodness of the resurrection. What comforts us is the beauty of the resurrection. And it's so beautiful, you can write beautiful poetry about it. So I ended up sending this guy a link to some Jared Manley Hopkins poems. The Nature is a Heraclitean Fire, and of the Comfort of the Resurrection. And of Felix Randall the farrier, Oh, is he dead then? The resurrection is so, so beautiful. And still talking about that because N.T. writes the resurrection of the Son of God is a theodicy of beauty, be it oh so dense and academic. But let's get to our top 2. All right, number 2, you know what? I did give them to you in the order I was going to end up giving them to you. N.D. Wilson's Note from the Tilt-A-Whirl. And I think that Wilson himself would be very pleased to be put in behind Chesterton, and think me slightly unhinged to put him ahead of Chesterton, although you know what, he did beat out Pascal. So maybe I do have a slightly inflated view of this guy's stuff, but it's pretty amazing. He wrote another one after Notes from the Tilt-A-Whirl about death. I wanted to call it Roaring Waters. It's not called Roaring Waters, that's ridiculous. It's beautiful, but not as beautiful as Notes from the Tilt-A-Whirl. I mean, it is the kind of book that will absolutely change how you perceive reality. God is beautiful, God is holy. Creation is beautiful, creation is holy. Kittens, thunderstorms, problem of evil. This book on the problem of evil is excellent. It's a classic, the answers he gives are classic C.S. Lewisian answers, but answers that are framed in a way that are really satisfying and convincing, not just to the person that you're talking to, but to you. To you. And it's important that when you are giving an account for your faith, you want people to see that you truly do find God and his work beautiful, that you truly do take comfort in the promises that he has given you, even though life is hard and you die. Number 1. Finally, we arrive at the end. So, number 1 book for Apologetics through Aesthetics, G.K. Chesterton's Orthodoxy. How could it be other? I mean, the man is magical with his turns of phrase and with his clean, and yet not machine-like logic. Wow, what a clear mind, what judo techniques to lead you to the mat of truth. His stuff on insanity and wholeness, his stuff on the intrinsic worth of man as given by God. You know, I read this before I read Notes from the Tilt-A-Whirl. So I'm not sure which one led more into the other for me. But I had always had this idea, which both of the top 2 books do a very good job of establishing. I'd always had this idea because my mother baptized me in C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien water. I always had this idea that the Fae, that fairy, was a terrible, wicked, ugly, awesome, virtuous, beautiful world where reality was, and that our world was more fey than we were ever willing to admit. And I think it's in the Ballad of the White Horse that Chesterton talks about. No, it's not. It's actually in this book. It's in Orthodoxy. Maybe it's not. Goodness. Anyway, at some point, Chesterton described the hills as being covered in green hair, but in a more beautiful way. And that is the world we live in. We don't live in a world that's just covered in grass. We live on a giant's head. We live an amazing fairy tale. And one thing that fairy tales have is meaning. So you have meaning. Another thing that fairy tales have are writers or creators. And our creator is telling a story. A good story. And not just because God is the fount of it, and God defines what is good and what is true and what is beautiful. There is nothing higher than God, including truth, beauty, and goodness. Those things come from him. And yet, you can look at the world and see that the story that's being told, despite all this sin and ugliness, it's very, very believable when God tells us this is a good story. And it's not just a good story because God will vindicate himself through it. He will vindicate us. This story is for our good. And so we find it beautiful. All right, y'all. That was the top 5. Hope you enjoyed it. Whoever made the request, maybe it was you, Wade O. Wells. Maybe it was someone else. I'm sorry, I forget. Hope you enjoyed. Peace be upon you.